Okay, let's talk about something that almost every homeowner has to deal with, but nobody really thinks about it until it's a huge problem. I'm talking about your gutters. Yeah, I know, it sounds kind of boring, but stick with me. The thickness of your gutters. It seems like such a tiny detail, right? Well, that one little choice can be the difference between a happy, dry home and some seriously expensive headaches down the road.
So, which is it going to be? 0.027 or 0.032? The entire decision comes down to that one tiny number. But you know what? It's a number that's responsible for protecting your biggest investment, your home. So let's dive in and figure out which one makes the most sense for you.
You know, this quote from Oneway Exteriors really hits the nail on the head. Our lives are full of choices, right? Most are small, like what to have for dinner. You forget about them instantly. But picking your gutter gauge, that's not one of them. This is one of those big, little decisions, the kind that can literally save you thousands of dollars in repairs later on.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, what do these numbers even mean? Then, we'll get into why such a tiny fraction of an inch matters so much. We'll put 0.027 and 0.032 head-to-head, figure out which factors matter for your house, and wrap it all up by looking at the long-term value. Sound good? Let's do it. Okay, first up, a seemingly tiny choice. Now, just to be clear, we're talking about seamless aluminum gutters here. You know, the kind they custom form right there on site at your house. And for these, the whole game really comes down to that one little number.
So, what are we even talking about? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. Those numbers, 0.027 and 0.032, that's just the thickness of the aluminum, in inches. That's it. But that one tiny measurement is what determines the strength and the durability of your home's entire first line of defense against water. It's a big deal.
And that's the perfect lead-in to our next big question. Why does this matter so much? I mean, how can a fraction of an inch, something you can't even see, make such a huge difference?
Well, it all comes down to something called gauge. And don't worry, it's not complicated. Gauge is just a fancy word for the thickness of sheet metal. And here's the key thing to remember. With aluminum gutters, the higher the number, the thicker and stronger the metal. So 0.032 is the beefier option. Think about what a gutter actually does. Its job is super simple, right? Catch all that water pouring off your roof and get it away from your house's foundation. But to do that job day in and day out, through heavy rain, snow, and ice, it has to be strong enough to not just bend or break. It has to hold its shape.
So get this. The actual difference in thickness between these two options is just 0.005 inches. To put that in perspective, that's literally thinner than a piece of printer paper. It's almost nothing. It seems totally insignificant, right? Well, here's where it gets crazy. That tiny, paper-thin difference, it translates to an 18.5% increase in thickness and strength. Whoa. All of a sudden, that 5/1000ths of an inch seems massive, doesn't it? And that, right there, is where real durability comes from. Because when you don't have that strength, things start to go wrong. And I mean really wrong. The thinner stuff gets dented just by leaning a ladder against it. It starts to sag and bow under the weight of wet leaves, or even worse, ice. If you live anywhere with tough winters, like northern Michigan or New England, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Heck, they can even pull right off the side of your house. Okay, so let's do a direct comparison. Let's put 0.027 and 0.032 side by side and see exactly how they stack up. All right, this chart really breaks it down. On one side, you've got your 0.027. It's the standard, more budget-friendly option. And look, if you live in a really mild climate, it might be fine. But then you have the 0.032. This is your heavy-duty option, built for places with heavy rain, snow, and wind. And check out the lifespan. You're looking at maybe an extra decade of life for just a slightly higher upfront cost. That's a huge difference. Let's put some labels on these. The 0.027, think of it as the national standard. Its big benefit? It costs less. The downfall? It's just flimsy. It's way more prone to damage. Now the 0.032, that's the heavy-duty choice. It's stronger, lasts longer, and performs better, period. The only real downside is that initial cost is a bit higher. And you definitely want a pro putting it on your house.
You know, I mentioned a term earlier, oil canning. Sounds weird, I know. It's just the industry term for that ugly, wavy, distorted look you sometimes see on the flat face of a gutter. It's mostly a cosmetic thing, but it's way, way more common with the thinner, less rigid 0.27 gutters.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory. Now let's get practical. How do you choose? What's right for your home?
Well, it all comes down to a handful of key factors about your house, and just as importantly, where you live.
You've got to ask yourself a few questions. First, what's your climate like? Are you dealing with heavy snow and ice every year like they do in Alaska or Maine? What about your roof? Is it huge? Is it steep? Because a big, steep roof dumps a ton of water really fast. And trees. Are you surrounded by trees that are just constantly dropping leaves and gunk? The more times you say yes to these, the more you need to be leaning towards that heavy-duty option.
In fact, here's a little checklist for you. 7 signs you probably need the thicker stuff. Do your gutters sag after a long winter? Do you get big icicles or ice dams all the time? Is your roof pretty big, over 2,000 square feet? Are you constantly having to reattach gutters that are pulling away? If you're nodding along to even a couple of these, especially that last one about planning to stay in your home for the long haul, then the .032 gauge is almost certainly the smarter move.
And that brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle, the long-term value. Because we're not just talking about buying a product here. This is a true investment, an investment in the health of your home and really in your own peace of mind.
I love this quote because it just says it all. That small extra charge you pay up front for the thicker .032 gutters, it pays for itself over and over again. Why? Because you're not paying for repairs. You're not paying for a replacement in 10 years. You're getting a system that can take a beating from the worst winter blizzard and still look perfectly straight and do its job.
So at the end of the day, making the right choice here isn't about getting through the next big rainstorm. It's about getting your home ready for the next 2 or 3 decades of storms. It's about saving yourself all the headaches and all the money that comes with a system that just wasn't built to last.
And so that's the final thought I want to leave you with. Next time you look at your house, don't just see the gutters that are hanging there. Ask yourself a simple question. Is my home really prepared for the next decade of weather? Or the next 2 decades? Is it ready for whatever Mother Nature is going to throw at it? The answer to that question, well, that's going to tell you everything you need to know.